Okay, so part two, or part deux, as they say in France. I'm, I'm actually quite sure they don't say that in France, but I just like the sound of it, so we'll call this part deux. Um, you'll have gathered before that I'm really quite enthusiastic about the new bristle brushes. You'll have gathered that in part one. In this part two, part deux, as I'm insisting on calling it this afternoon, we're actually going to concentrate on the mixer brush tool. Now, the mixer brush is a completely new painting tool to CS5. You'll no doubt remember before we had the conventional brush tool, which we were using with the bristle brushes in part one of this video experience. Excuse my email there, I'll turn that off in a second. And although the bristle brushes are really impressive using the traditional brush tool, that's nothing compared to the way they are when you use them in conjunction with the mixer brush tool. Okay, so mixer brush, it's nested with the traditional brush tool. So click and hold on the traditional brush tool and choose the mixer brush from the flyout there. So I know what you're thinking. You'll have seen lots of hype on the internet about the new mixer brush tool, and you're probably wondering, pretty much what it does. Right, let's demonstrate that straight away. I'm going to use the mixer brush in its default setting. We can choose various kind of mix modes for the brush itself, and we're going to come back to those a little later. But for the time being, I'm simply going to demonstrate it. So, using one of our favourite bristle brushes, just going to lay down some colour here, and you can immediately see, compared to the marks we made with the conventional brush tool, this is very, very different indeed. We've got this kind of, well, for want of a better word, mixing happening here. Let me just choose another colour, and again just lay down some of that colour. Now, as I've said before, as a traditional painter, this thing is completely revolutionary in terms of Photoshop. Let's have another colour, and again we'll just lay some of this colour down, and you can see as I do this just how effective this mixer brush is. We're actually laying colours on top of one another here, and they're blending together. I mean, with the traditional brush tool, there's no way of doing that. It just doesn't happen. Apart from using kind of opacity and flow dynamics, this just doesn't happen with the conventional brush tool. We can actually choose a colour for the mixer brush directly from the colour swatch up in the options bar there. Now, I would point out at this point, remember, I'm not a textbook instructor here. What I'm telling you here is the way I've found to use this particular tool. Now, that's probably doesn't kind of fit within the philosophy of an Adobe help manual, but I'm just giving you the benefit of my limited experience here, and you can see just how dynamic this brush is, just how these strokes are kind of flowing and merging together. So I actually mentioned earlier that we've got different kind of mix modes for this mixer brush tool. For the moment, I'm just going to choose the dry mode. Let's choose another colour here. Incidentally, I really haven't got a clue what we're actually painting here. But you'll notice that the dry mode for the mixer brush amazingly enough, looks very dry. So basically, you get what you see, essentially. The mixer brush used dry really doesn't blend with any existing paint much at all. You know, it's dry. In effect, it works pretty much like the conventional brush tool. However, the further we go down the list, the wetter we get, the wetter the brush gets, and the more it mixes with existing colour. So if I go to moist light mix, for instance, and kind of carry this line on, you'll see now that that line is mixing and blending far more with the existing colour on this particular layer. And this is just so, I mean, if you've ever used Painter before, you know, no one's saying, I don't think, that CS5 is a replacement or even a competitor for Painter. But, you know, look how it works in terms of applying paint. This is completely new kind of stuff for Photoshop. We've never had this facility before. We used to be able to do bits and bobs with the old smudge tool. We used to be able to kind of smudge things fairly randomly and fairly unreliably. But with this thing, literally with one brush, we could do an entire painting, and it could look like real media. Now, for anyone on the internet at the moment that's saying that the new mixer brush tool in CS5 is only good for, I think the expression is, pushing pixels around, you are so wrong. I mean, I'm an artist of some, well, 30 odd years experience. That's not being arrogant. That's nothing about me. This is about this new tool. This is something that enables us to create complete paintings with a single tool. You know, this isn't about pushing pixels around. This is about raw creativity. And any painters or illustrators out there, you know, this thing is going to be a complete revelation. Now, one of the really great things about the mixer brush tool for me, let's just for the moment choose a completely different bristle brush. Incidentally, you can use this mixer brush with any brush in Photoshop. You can use it even with the conventional kind of, I suppose we could say, old-fashioned static brushes. So you're not just limited to using the mixer brush with the bristle brush tips, as it were. Once again, let me just make a few alterations to this particular brush. Even less bristles than that, I think. Yeah, one of the real advantages is where at the moment I'm actually painting with colour. We can actually use this new mixer brush purely as a blender. You'll see up here next to the little chip that indicates the colour we're currently using on the brush, we've got two little icons. If I deactivate this particular icon, which indicates that Photoshop should load the brush with colour after each stroke, if I deactivate that, in effect what I've got is a simple blender. I'm not applying any colour here. All I'm doing is picking up the existing colour and blending it together based on the setting I choose for the mixer brush itself. Let's go for very wet, heavy mix here. You know, and I can go in and just carefully blend these colours that I've already laid down. Now, that's advantage enough. You know, I mean, in effect, this allows you to kind of create quite a rough sort of colour sketch, and then we could actually go in and literally sculpt with paint. We could sculpt with colour. So we're not actually laying any new colour down. All we're doing is simply blending and shifting existing colour. You know, I mean, this is completely new stuff. This is just beyond belief. It's just brilliant. The guys at Adobe have done so well here. And back to the conversation about Painter. As far as I'm concerned, there is a need for a simple painting tool. It's all very well having drawers and drawers full of different brushes, full of custom brushes, etc., etc. But when I paint traditionally, I probably have kind of half a dozen brushes in all, and it's us that makes these brushes do what we want them to, not the brushes that make us do what they want us to. Did I make that plain? I don't think I did really, but basically it's not the tools, it's how you use them, and there are very great advantages to having very simple tools at your disposal. As well as this, we've got this facility to sample all layers, which you'll notice at the moment I've got activated here. Now, the actual mixer brush tool allows you to work on essentially as many layers as you like. One thing I would say is just make sure that you have this sample all layers checked, otherwise you're going to run into real problems. The mixer brush settings are not going to work for you unless you have this sample all layers checked. So with this, what I can do, we're still not applying any colour, we're still working with the very wet heavy mix setting, just so we've got a simple blender, and all I'm going to do here is just blend this green stroke. You'll remember I did this one with the conventional brush tool. Just going to blend that green stroke in with the white background itself. You know, remember, this mix setting determines how much underlying colour is being picked up by the brush as we stroke. Now the underlying colour here obviously is the green on this layer and the white on the original background layer. So using this simple blender, I can just blend away, you know, and really soften this stroke out. Now the great thing is here, because we were using the sample all layers option, I can now simply turn this layer off, and you'll see that that original green stroke is completely intact. We haven't actually changed it in any way at all. All we've done is picked up that particular green and picked up the white from the underlying background layer, and we've kind of blended the two together. So this is true non-destructive painting. You know, we can try things with this. We can paint something roughly on one layer and then use a simple kind of blender to modify it on another. If we don't like the result, if it doesn't work, you know, all we have to do is just throw that layer away and we're back to the original painting. There's so much more to cover here. I mean, for example, the kind of blender trick that I showed you before means that we can not only paint directly with colour and have it blend together and blend existing colour on the canvas, but we can also actually go back into what I like to call blender mode. Make sure that we've got sample all layers checked. We can add a new layer above a background image, and then, you know, still depending on these kind of mix settings that we use, we can kind of go in and just blend this photograph. I mean, this is just, you know, we're talking virtually instant paintings here. We're literally just moving colour around on the canvas. I mean, I can literally go straight into this this photograph. Let me just reduce the size of my brush a bit, and I can literally just shift pixels around. Now, this is quite literally kind of pixel shifting, but it's so effective, you know. And I can't demonstrate in just a few strokes quite how effective this is, because it's not a magic bullet. You can't suddenly paint beautiful pictures with this mixer brush tool. You know, it's still about where we place our kind of strokes, and you can't just sort of willy-nilly paint all over the place. But you know, if you use your brushes properly, just as you would with conventional painting, and you size things properly, we can very soon end up with a really effective kind of painting here. And as I said before, that the real advantage to this is because we can use this kind of sample all layers option. This painting itself exists entirely on a layer of its own. If I switch this background layer off here, you'll actually see that the areas I've painted exist on an entirely separate layer. It's just brilliant, you know. If you didn't make a particularly good job of it, then trash the layer. Added to the fact that we can then kind of go out of cloning mode, as I seem to be insisting on calling it. Let's go for another mix mode for the mixer brush here, and then we can simply lay in colour deliberately. You know, we can actually use our own colour. So you could establish the kind of underpainting by, in inverted commas, cloning, and then, you know, work on top of that with extra colour, so we can actually achieve a complete original painting, because that's what it is. You know, you're controlling where the colours go, you're controlling the colours you use, and you're controlling the direction and kind of quality of the brush strokes. If we want some really nice kind of crisp highlights on this, we can go in with the dry version of the mixer brush and just put those in. You know, we've got absolutely as much potential here as we possibly need. Let's have a little light within that petal. Okay, so really quick demonstration. I mean, as I said in the first place, there's really no way I can demonstrate every part of this tool's potential in a few minutes, but join me in the future, and I'm going to make it my mission to show you just how much potential this new CS5 mixer brush has. Okay, my name has been and still is Tim Shelbourne. I hope you enjoyed that and you'll benefit from it, and I'll see you again soon.